really excited to have Matt Domiancic on, who served as a police officer for a large department in the Metro DC area. During his LEO career, he worked in many areas, including patrol, SWAT, peer support, academy instructor, and as a wellness coordinator. And if that wasn't enough, Matt also worked as a strength and conditioning coach at Georgetown and Yale. Matt integrated these interests and taught officers sports nutrition, fitness, combatives, and much more. Matt has multiple master's degrees in pastoral theology, sports psychology, and forensic science. So we think that Matt truly embodies the warrior poet trope, that is, those who fight with intellect, conviction, and great skill. So Matt, thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. Lexi and I met you through a mutual acquaintance who I think you have met on a few retreats through peer support and that kind of thing. How did you get so involved and invested in the peer support / wellness aspect of police work?
Well, the wellness thing's just natural because, as we've all discussed before, I'm a former jock, played college football, competed in powerlifting. Since 12 years old, my life has been like nutrition, lifting, mental training, whatever you can do to be the best athlete. And that just kind of carried over into what can I do to be the best police officer? And then also, just much like my athletic career, when it ends, how can I pass this passion and knowledge on to hopefully encourage other people to be the best athletes they can be? How can we try to help other police officers be the best they can be? So the wellness and the performance stuff was natural. Peer support, I had no idea what it was in Connecticut because we didn't have it initially when I started. And then when I moved to the DC area, actually an officer on the day shift, and we still communicate to this day, he said, basically, hey, Matt, there's this peer support team. It's a lot of old ladies that show up and want to hug and tell you it's okay to cry. And a lot of people don't respect them. And, you know, you have street credibility, you have credibility as a coach. And we work the busy district. So he suggested that I do it. And I don't think at that time anybody from my district was on peer support. So I was like from the cool district on peer support. And then eventually I made SWAT. I was the only SWAT guy on peer support. So I think it was beneficial because if you show up and they know you're at least working somewhere where you're doing felony arrests, maybe they'll at least put up with you. And, you know, so that's how peer support started. And when I was at Yale and Georgetown, I was involved in sports ministry too. And not in a super, and even now as like a police chaplain, I'm not like Mr. Religion. I just want to love and care about people without pushing anything on them. So it was just a natural extra role to say, hey, like this is emotional and mental health is so important. So this peer support thing was a good opportunity. So that's kind of how it all started.
I'm curious if you've seen people then throughout your career as they've sort of entered the peer support program or utilized some of the resources. Have you seen like a shift in those individuals in their demeanor or their maybe their longevity or their ability to cope with the job?
The peer support people?
The people who've utilized it as a resource, the officers.
It all depends on agency and situation, right? Because there are big time problems with peer support. If the people don't have credibility, or if your department says, we want to help you, we really care about mental health, tell peer support. And I don't know if it's happened there, but it's happened in many agencies where people come forward finally, get over the whole stigma of suck it up, all the macho bullshit we deal with. Somebody becomes vulnerable, they tell peer support something, and then they open an IA investigation, or they do a fit for duty.
That is not ideal.
No. So if that happens in an agency, you basically kill the peer support efforts. On the other hand, there's agencies, because I also am a chaplain for a PTSD facility. It's called First Responders First, cops, firemen, and medics, PTSD, substance issues. There's people that get arrested for like 2 DUIs in a month, and their department takes them there and says, stay here for 3 months if you need it. And when you get better, you still have your job. We know that the job is stressful. It's almost like presumptive. We all see trauma. We all deal with stress, and self-medicating is a natural thing that first responders and veterans do. So this is part of the job. We take responsibility. We want to help you. That's good leadership. That's a good department. And then you may trust peer support. And then what you also get is guys and gals that have been through some serious stuff that then get help and then come back to the department and say, hey, I was the hard ass. I was the one that thought you shouldn't, see a therapist or go to treatment. But I got involved in a shooting. I had a divorce and I started popping pills after a knee surgery. And I realized now I should have reached out for help. So then you get testimonies of people that have street credibility. And that works with, younger people or the hard asses, if that makes sense. So I've seen peer support save people's lives if it's run properly.
Can you talk a little bit, Matt, about, for those that listen or watch this that aren't in law enforcement, the type of things that lend to that type of trauma that we have to deal with, that kind of bring them to this peer support or the retreats or PTSD?
Well, it's hard for other people to imagine. And they think, especially the way they portray cops, as we are like so violent and we like enjoy it. But using violence on another person, definitely a shooting, but even using lower forces of violence, if you've read Dave Grossman's books, is stressful. Like, it's not like we're trying to beat people up for fun. Like, harming another human being when it's necessary is stressful. And then these days you get doxxed. You use force. I have police officers call me and say, I hope I'm not going to be on the news tonight. So like, officers are getting death threats now because of things in the media. Seeing suicides, seeing accident scenes, seeing other human beings suffer on a daily basis, even domestics. What if you have a shift where you have like 3 or 4 domestics and you just see the pain emotionally that people inflict on each other? Child neglect. I mean, there's cases of child neglect that I'll never get out of my head.
Yeah, me too.
So just human suffering on a daily, frequent basis, depending on where you work, but even in a small town. I used to, even not in such a judgmental way, but be like, if you work in a small town with less crime, maybe they don't get hit as hard. And then some of these retreats we run, or other ones I've observed, or people that I've helped, well, when you work in a small town and you show up on the traffic accident, that 16-year-old that's mangled is your daughter's best friend. So it doesn't matter whether it's a big city or a small town. You are just immersed in the misery and the suffering of other people. You have to use violence on other people. People routinely, and even more these days, want to inflict violence on you and want to talk trash about you. Your kids go to school and the teachers tell them mom and dad's a racist and a murderer. The college professors are telling your kids that. Like, police officers' kids have to be scared to open their mouth in school and in college. It's terrible. And even in the churches, a lot of these pastors, preachers, rabbis. So it's like cops right now are under attack from everyone. On top of, we've known that this profession has a 10 to 20 year shorter lifespan than any other profession, a higher suicide rate, higher incidence of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, I think even Alzheimer's, and a laundry list of medical conditions that are related to stress. Sleep issues cause hormone issues, adrenaline dumps, cortisol spikes cause medical problems over the long term. I mean, there's a lot. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, you got me. I quit. I'm just putting in my resignation. No, it's all valid and all true, and everything that you're saying. I think probably Lexi and I are just hitting just everything that you've kind of reeled off. We're thinking of like incidents or things or experiences that we've had where, we don't talk about it a lot. Cops don't talk about it a lot because of the kind of the bravado thing that you mentioned earlier. But I think we can all attest to those things and how greatly they do affect our mental health and our physical health. And I'm just curious, as we view officer wellness and as that's becoming a little bit more of a priority, at least interdepartmentally, maybe not on sort of a national scale. It's not it's not going to be a sexy thing to talk about right now, obviously, but interdepartment, what does officer wellness look like in terms of, you've had experience sort of developing these programs. For you, what are the pillars of officer wellness?
I'll say what I think is common, but not the answer. And that is the reactive PTSD, or we wait until you're broken and swoop in and try to help you. That is not officer wellness. Officer wellness has to involve physical fitness, your shooting, your defensive tactics, nutrition, stress management, mental, emotional health, and spiritual health as well. It has to be very holistic. It can't be just like pick one piece of the pie and let's address that. And if it's just mental health, let's wait until a big officer involved shooting or whatever critical event, and let's have peer support just respond and ask if you want to talk or send you a text. And what do 9 out of 10 times the officers do? No, I'm good. I don't need it.
Well, so, I'm relieved to hear you say those things, because as we speak, those are the exact things that are being developed, at least with our unit in our department. So it's somewhat of a relief.
Well, that's why I mentioned you guys on other podcasts. Like when they say who's doing it right, I'm like, not too many people, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's that sort of waiting until something happens or being more proactive. And I think that that's a huge thing that needs to be addressed in a lot of departments, because like you said, officers are going to say, oh, I'm fine. But we can recognize, like you said, there is a ton of stress, whether it's just what we see on the job or the external stress of just all the narrative and the strife and whatnot that's going on. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people get into this profession to help. And if they're not feeling like they're able to help for whatever reason, it creates this void that is really hard to fill. And it's really hard to just emotionally get better with that. And I think that's what a lot of officers are facing this day. I'm curious if you're seeing that where you are doing your chaplain work.
Seeing officers stressed out?
Stressed out with just feeling like a lack of purpose.
Yeah. 2020 and 2021 already this is bad. I knew it was going to be bad, but it seems like it could be even worse than I predicted last year, just because of some of the political developments. It doesn't matter who does what. The cops are at fault, right? It just doesn't matter. Some conservative people were involved in something that was horrible, but the cops somehow are still at fault for, it's terrible.
Well, yeah. So among the kind of the attributes that you mentioned regarding officer wellness, one of the things that we've also started to try and incorporate is a mentorship program, which we find to be it distinguishes itself apart from like FTO, which is more of a I guess an academic type thing, and there's a scoring, and so it's kind of teacher student. This is a purely mentorship type of relationship with where you have maybe a seasoned officer and a recruit who's from the beginning of the academy all the way through and kind of can lead them through their career. And we thought that was a void, and somebody noted that and was able to kind of kickstart a program. And I think that touches on something that we find extremely valuable, which is that leadership aspect. And leaders come in all shapes and sizes. And even you said it's not, it's not dependent on rank. It is, it's about your influence. And I won't forget the last time we talked, you mentioned that. And nothing rings more true than that. So I'm just curious, to touch on a little bit of your leadership experiences. We'll start with, who are some people that stood out to you? You don't have to name names, but maybe some characteristics of those folks that really kind of defined how you view leaders.
Well, if we had a whole 10 hours, I would go through my life, like my father. There's coaches I've had, there's teachers I've had, there's older teammates I've had. And I've also had mentors in martial arts and strength conditioning coaching. I've had different priests that have been what are called spiritual directors that have been mentors. But in law enforcement specifically, I'm super fortunate that I was starting at the patrol level. My lieutenant in that district that I talked about, I think it was before we started recording, we were like the squad that you had to get nominated by the lieutenant, then voted on by everybody. And we were aggressive. Like, we got after it. His nickname was the Beast, and he would slam the table after roll call and say, "Feed the Beast." He was out on the streets with us, any hot calls. He even pitted cars and tasered people sometimes. He was super aggressive. We trained all the time as a squad. We even did a 3-day combat shooting course where we went to Storm Mountain Training Center. It's a contract training facility that I lived at for 3 months during my first master's. We went out there as a patrol squad and basically trained like a SWAT team. He was an undercover narc, former Marine, jump out, like it's like the Vice Squad, tactical narcotics. He had worked all these different aggressive units in the agency. So like, he had major credibility. He didn't hide in the station. And when people complained on us, he was super fair and would put them on speakerphone and let us hear what people were saying. And as long as he believed we were in the right, he went and backed us up. Even if we had a station captain at one point who was more of a goober and like coming down on people, he would stand up and take heat for us. You know, to have a supervisor willing to stand up for you and not play the political game. So on a patrol level, to have somebody that has vast experience in different units and was somebody that liked getting after it and stands up for the troops and backs you up and shows up on the street, can't beat that. When I made SWAT, I'll never forget, I can say his nickname is Lomo, Major Lomo. I couldn't believe it. I was all nervous on one of my first search warrants, like getting in the stack and going in the house. The frickin' major from command staff every once in a while would go on search warrants with us. And he would show up at the range and shoot. And when I implemented things at the academy, I had to speak to command staff because my supervisors wouldn't do it at the academy. He'd show up at command staff. Everybody loved having their white uniforms on, you know, dressed up. He'd show up in BDUs with the drop-down holster. This guy was like an old school Clint Eastwood. He showed up on a call off duty in my district. I wasn't on that day, but there was some guy with a gun. Call went out. He showed up and shot the guy off duty, major command staff. We also had another major female who loved training, played in an adult soccer league, showed up when I was at the academy, trained her ass off at the gym, pushed for, even if it wasn't within her scope of influence directly, she was involved in many facets of the department. And when she knew somebody was trying to do something that was meaningful, she'd come and ask how she could help you and try to help push it along. And then I had this course called Train to Win. It was a 1 full day of stress inoculation training, force on force ammunition, full contact fighting scenarios with red man gear. All the instructors were the SWAT and the jump out guys. And those were some of the stuff where we put on heart rate monitors. It was hard. You ran the SWAT obstacle course, chasing somebody, getting shot at. You got to arrest a combative subject. She did it as a major, like voluntarily, and like was into it. Like, so you see somebody on command staff that basically goes through like an ass whooping day, gets after it just to see what it's like, rather than other people observe it and say, it looked like a good course. Maybe I'll send some officers through it. So, and she's now the chief of another department in Northern Virginia. And without even speaking to the officers there, I bet you if we surveyed them, I'm guessing morale's probably pretty good in that department. You know, when you have a leader like that.
So it sounds like all of those examples were people that were willing to do what they asked of you.
Good way to summarize it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also hear you talking a lot about training. And I think that that's something that is so important for officers. How would you summarize in your own words, like how important that is, the constant training and what it does for you as an officer?
Well, I wore this shirt for you guys. There's this company I like now.
My fiance has those.
Oh, they're so good. And on the back, it says, "This is the way."
Yeah,
you know, the Mandalorian. Yeah. Oh,
he's got like 5 of them because he can't just do one.
Nice. So as a supervisor training or just training in general? I mean,
training as a patrol officer.
Well, you're never going to get enough in the academy. And I criticize agencies for not doing more. But also, if you come into this profession, it's your own life insurance policy to be fit, to know how to shoot, and not just paper targets in broad daylight with no stress. And also to know how to fight. And I'm not asking everybody to be a jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai expert, but you got to do above and beyond what you're going to get at the academy and in service. It's just our professional responsibility. And it's your responsibility to your loved ones, whether that's your parents, your spouse, your children. You want to come home safe. And as far as the PTSD or just the depression and the emotional and mental stressors of the job, somebody that's more prepared is going to have less issues, right? And you're also going to use force less. We see these ugly things on TV. The media doesn't explain just how little training most officers have. And when you make mistakes or you get hurt, you're going to have more of a psychological consequence as well. And we've talked about this before. Officers that are, even an officer that's super fit alone, whether it's a power lifter, a bodybuilder, a CrossFitter, you know, people that are obsessed with whatever their realm of lifting is, they're more confident on the street, even if they can't shoot and fight. The fact that they look fit and they are physically fit gives them better communication skills, which I think is better community policing. You have a command presence, and you're also not having to amp things up to get control of a situation. When you're fit, and especially if you know you can fight and shoot as well, you can be so much more calm and peaceful and friendly and let things go much further because you're not going to panic. The out of shape police officer is the one that, one more time, I'm going to lock you up, or they start yelling. We've all been around officers that start yelling and talking crap, and they create a use of force situation by their energy. Or they pull a taser, mace, baton, asp, or even a gun, like way before you need to, if you're confident in going hands-on. So there's 1,000,001 reasons why fitness, shooting, defensive tactics, and stress inoculation are important. Because you can also be really good at shooting and fighting, but if you haven't been inoculated to the stressors of that, whether it's through reality-based scenario training, sparring, spending your own money to go to a combative firearms course with either some SWAT or special ops guys that have you running and gunning and doing force on force with simunitions, where you're going to feel some pain and you're going to be scared. You got to go through that stuff. Just like you can't get good at football by studying the playbook. You cannot get good at football by watching football, even though we have all kinds of armchair quarterbacks. And you can't even, watching film and studying the playbook is important for a sport. You all know that as athletes. Yeah. But you got to practice. And what is the progression in practice in a football camp? You walk through the drills, no pads, then you do helmets, then you do shoulder pads, and you do 50% butt up. Eventually, you're scrimmaging full contact long before the game. But in law enforcement, it's almost like we do PowerPoints of the playbook. We walk through some things to get you through the academy and check the box. And then the first day that you have full pads and go full contact is on the street, maybe after your FTO, and it's like the first time you've been punched in the face for real. Then we have overwhelming psychological and physiological response that's not healthy, that you don't know how to work through.
Yeah, Lexi got punched in the face the other day in training.
I was sporting a black eye. No, actually, I went to an MMA class, which turned out to be like an hour and a half of just full-on sparring, and which is great. I love it. But another officer was there with me, and I asked him afterwards. I was like, "How'd that go for you?" He's like, "Man, I got my ass kicked." And I said, "That's good. I think every cop should do that in a controlled setting. Like, you should know your limitations. You should know what it feels like to be completely dominated, and like just have that, like you said, psychological reaction. Because if you don't have it in training, you're going to have it out on the street, and you might freak out because it's scary."
It is.
Yeah. But if you train it and you train it over and over again, it becomes less scary. So
yeah. Yeah. Like,
You
I
know,
didn't know how hard. Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off,
no,
Callie?
go. No, this is your jam. This is your show.
Well,
Go.
well, football players, we think we're real tough. Well, at the Air Force Academy, they made the men box and they put all the football players in the same gym classes, probably so we didn't beat up the little guys. Man, an hour of just heavy bag on and off or sparring, it was scary and it was freaking exhausting. Like, that was a wake up call to me. And then in college, there were guys on my football teams at Air Force and at Colgate that were also high school wrestlers. And I was super strong. Like, I mean, I was always into lifting. So I'm super strong, but I didn't have any fighting skills. And when like a smaller guy that was a wrestler might grab me in the locker room, I mean, I played it off like, quit horsing around, asshole. But it was fearful to have somebody like lock you up that knows what they're doing. Then eventually in grad school, when I did do jujitsu, I used to get submitted by little guys all the time initially because there was that panic, exhausting myself, spazzing out, and they just grab something and submit you, or they wait till you get worn out. We need to do that before it happens on the street.
That's so me too. I can relate to that. Lexi, you remember when we went to that like Muay Thai class down in Austin, and it was just like a class you could go to. It was like at On It or something. Remember that? And my friend's friend was coaching it up. I was so tired. Like I was like getting side stitches and it was like nothing to you. And my body was exactly like it is anytime I go to DT and everyone's like, Callie, fucking relax, man. And it's like, I just have the lifting mentality, which is 100 miles an hour. If someone grabs your arm or tries to put you in a certain position, you use as much brute force as possible to get that person away from you. And that is not the mindset you have to have for DT. You have to like know the levers. You have to know, more efficient ways to operate. But so one of the things I was going to mention too is that when I was on light duty, I was writing some grant proposals. And we were trying to get like a shit ton of money for a fitness program and a kind of a rehab for injuries that are most prevalent in police work. And the main thing I kept hammering home was that this is a huge benefit for the community. Not only does it save the city a shit ton of money, that's just the superficial thing, right? The money thing, everybody wants to hear dollar signs. But the real deep meaning behind it is exactly what you were touching on, which is officers are able to go through that, that kind of force escalation or not use force at all. They're able to come in with a cool, calm, collected demeanor. They're able to work through scenarios when they have more exposure to stress. And their air is much more confident. And so they're less likely to resort to the tools on their tool belt as well. And it's just, I kept trying to hammer that home. It's important to the community to understand that is the byproduct of this training. It's not like we just want to run and gun. I mean, shit, sometimes it's like the last thing you want to do on your day off is just more like put on the gear and go out and hit it. But that's why it's such a priority, because it really does trickle down to that trust with the community, right?
And talk about money. Talk about money for training. Look at all these ugly uses of force incident, even if they end up justified, and look at how much the cities pay out. Breonna Taylor was $12 million. How much training could $12 million pay for? And then even in justified shootings or other use of force incidents where people get hurt, cities pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars. Train your officers properly, and you won't have those incidents where as many, right? There's always going to be something in this day in our society, people are going to sue, but you train harder up front, there's going to be less ugly things for the media and the politicians to rip on, and less uses of force. I mean, and that takes talking about leadership. Command staffs and chiefs, if they're more like the two majors I told you about or my patrol supervisor, they could explain that to the city council or the county board of supervisors. It may not convince them, but they could try to explain to them, hey, because I know this perception, right? People are like, you're going to be so violent probably. You do all this MMA, you do all this tactical shooting, you're into this powerlifting, you're more likely to be aggressive. That's the perception of an ignorant person that is not a warrior or not an athlete. But if you have a command staff or a chief that can go to the city council and go to the county board or whatever your government body is and explain, instead of new paint jobs for the cruisers and desks for command staff and PowerPoints telling you you're a racist, because, you know, we're really going to lecture the racism out of people if we were stupid enough to hire a racist. Let's pay for more shooting, fighting, fitness, duty, and stress inoculation scenario training. And every department in the country, this is just a personal opinion, should hire somebody like Tony Blauer to come in and explain the SPEAR system, because it does explain the physiology and the psychology of a violent encounter. And you should have the politicians sit in on that class and let them do some scenarios.
Well, you'd have to get them to agree first, which is the first step. But what I do love about his system is that, to me, it's almost like a sports breakdown. Like, what he's looked at thousands of hours of use of force and looked at the flinch response and how you respond to that. And it's so interesting to me. But I always explain it like, when I first got involved in martial arts, every time I got hit in the face, I would cry like a baby. And it took me, I mean, you could ask the people that were teaching me, but it took me about a year to really like get that, you know, that didn't really hurt that bad. I can withstand it, and I can actually enjoy this back and forth. But if you don't train that, like, you have no idea what your emotional response is going to be to being hit in the face. And it might happen in the job. It might never happen. But if it does, you need to know that you can control it. And if you don't train it, how are you going to control it? So
are you just trying to start a fight club? Is that what's going on here? Because I'm
not that hardcore.
I'm not that hardcore.
Have you guys ever fought in high gear suit? You can do your shooting, you can do all your martial arts moves in it, and you feel more pain than those blimp red man suits, which is a good thing, to feel more pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can't guard against those things in training. Like, they have to be a reality. I know that the problem departments butt up against is that, you know, people get hurt during training. It's going to be a longer period of time before they get out on the street, or there's possible lawsuits or L&I, whatever. But if we avoid that pain altogether, you know, it's going to happen on the street. And then, you know, like you said, there might be consequences well beyond, you know, just that
an injury
initial.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do we tell our kids to stop practicing sports because they might get hurt? Think about this. How dumb is this? The kids might get hurt in training, so we're only going to let them play in games. The college and the pro athletes might get hurt in training, so we're only going to play games. How ugly are the games going to look, and how many pulled hammies and torn groins are there going to be? I mean, this is really stupid how we train in law enforcement. Look at what the sporting world does. And for those people that are parents, other than because of COVID, your high school kid, and for people that are not cops, this is something for you to understand. Your high school volleyball, baseball, basketball, football player practices more hours per week in their sports skill than a police officer gets in an entire year in shooting and fighting. Things that could lead to life or death for themselves, for a bad guy, or someone that's innocent in the community.
And furthermore, a lot of these kids, even at the high school level, that's high school level, have a whole team of people whose job it is to guarantee their success or to optimize their performance as much as possible. Team nutritionists, team, PTs,
strength coach, trainer,
totally.
Athletic trainer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got the water guy, you got the towel guy, you got the cheerleaders, for God's sakes. So yeah, I get it. Listen, you don't have to preach to us. And I there's so many times where people kind of, throw it in your face, like that police officers have less training hours under their belt at least the academy in general, is shorter than like a beautician school, or isn't that what it is?
I've heard different. I've heard and what, barbers?
Barber school, yeah.
And at least those people are asking that question.
Yeah, it's great.
Because other people think that your rookie police officer, our new president, shoot him in the leg.
I know.
Okay. How hard is it to shoot somebody in the leg under stress while they're moving? Like, people think that cops should be fighting like a UFC fighter or Bruce Lee, shooting like a Delta Force, Army Ranger, Navy SEAL, SF guy, and handling situations like a lawyer and a psychologist would with a 6-month academy. How are we going to become ninjas, gunslingers, psychologists, and lawyers in 6 months?
I think the only person qualified to do that, by the way, would be you, because your resume touches on all those things. So,
well, and on top of all that, like, take money away from the department so they have even less chance of getting the training that they need, right? It's just, we are required to try to think ahead of the problem, right? Like, how do we mitigate the use of force? How do we mitigate the crisis? How do we, set up the perimeters so that we can make sure we can slow everything down? And yet taking money away is almost doing the opposite of that, like taking away our opportunities to slow those things down, to get the training we need, to do all those tactical things that make the bad results happen,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to get on too many cases, but like, I was curious with, let's be frank, like one case started this whole gong show, one case. And I was curious, how much DT did those, well, first of all, 2 of them were on their FTO for a week or 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the veteran officer that caused this the spark that ignited our country going at war with itself, how much DT training has that guy had? How much scenario training has that guy had? He didn't look like he was super fit. I'm not ripping on him, but does that agency provide any incentives or opportunities to stay fit on duty? I mean,
yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely going to be some onus on departments. And I honestly think that, that things will start to swing back that way, and people will start to realize that that is such an integral part to, like I said, developing that trust with the community. But before this devolves into a full-on roll call bitch fest, I wanted to ask you, despite everything that's kind of going on in the bad publicity that cops are getting, and I'm just curious how you're dealing with it in a way to sort of maintain a positive mindset and really set an example for these officers who you still continue to help every day.
So my personal self-care routine, or how do I stay positive?
Yeah. How do you stay positive so that you can continue to do your good work for officers and first responders?
So a lot of things, I'm in Los Angeles for whoever's listening, and everything's on strict lockdown. I'm fortunate enough that I get to sneak into a performance facility this whole time and still get to train because they're sneaking in pro athletes. So thank God I got the gym 5 days a week, and I try to meditate for a half hour or an hour a day. And I try to do a half hour or an hour of reading a day. I still, do therapy once a week. I do, it's on Zoom, which I don't like, but I still do therapy. I try to maintain what I can with what the limited resources are right now. And to be honest, for me, what's inspiring is, for instance, I just talked to another retired cop last week, and he is a college professor now in criminal justice. And he said that he has a class of 20 people that are all still passionate and fired up to be cops, and that is encouraging. This last Friday, I was shooting. I just got back into shooting. It's so hard to shoot in LA, and I've stepped away from it. But the way things are, I want to start carrying again. And I just got back into shooting, and I was with a bunch of young people that just got out of the military. They finished their enlistment. And there's this business called Covered Six. that certifies people like an executive protection, security details, and you can use your GI Bill. So all these young people just getting out of the military use their GI Bill and go through these month or 2 month, they do DT, PT shooting. And they're kind enough to let me show up on the shooting days. And I am so inspired, one, to be around a bunch of young veterans that are super patriotic and loved serving their country. And a lot of them are still fired up to go into local or federal law enforcement. Like, that is inspiring to me. And it really, like, Friday, I was so juiced. A whole day of shooting, sunshine, fresh air, not sitting in the apartment, slinging lead and around a bunch of young military guys. I drove home in bad LA traffic, like on cloud 9. So for me, it's training, all the stuff we're talking about. Even though I'm a chaplain, I still get excited about lifting. I'm not doing any fighting right now. My doctors told me, even though people are sneaking their jiu-jitsu and stuff, my doctors told me just to hold off a bit on rolling around and sweating with people. But for me, training, for me, being around cops, and also at the PTSD facility, I'm around firemen and medics too, to hear the stories, even though they're heartbreaking. And man, a lot of people are carrying heavy loads. That fuels me to know what our cops and our firefighters go through, and that they don't have support systems. The community, the politicians don't recognize what they're going through. And many agencies don't have strong mental health or peer support systems. And they don't have, a lot of them have no wellness type stuff like you guys are doing, or like what I was trying to do back then, and increasing the shooting, defensive tactics, the fitness, giving them supplements, using heart rate monitors, trying to do, visualization, breath work, all these other things that our Division I and professional athletes and our special operations soldiers get all this stuff. Our cops and our firemen don't. So that's part of whether it keeps me positive or not. It keeps me fueled that what I still consider my brothers and sisters are out there doing a job that's way tougher than it was when I was working. And if in any little way, shape, or form I can be a resource or support them, I'll do it the rest of my life for free.
So let me ask you this. I heard you say that you still do a lot of self-care. You do therapy once a week and more. What would you say to that young officer that is feeling like they can't be vulnerable in that manner?
Like I tell everybody, like, dude, well, we got to get over this. You're the P word, or you're a wimp, or you're not tough if you take care of yourself. It's stupid. How many veterans, cops, and firemen are we losing? We're losing more veterans to suicide than combat, and more cops and firemen to suicide than in the line of duty deaths. That's a problem. And a lot of it, because I do hear the stories of people that are suicidal, and 9 out of 10 of them have something like, I don't want to show emotion. Sometimes it's because of the father issues. I grew up with a dad that told me to suck it up. I'll give you something to cry about. That's the masculinity, negative stuff in our culture. Men can't show emotions. Women in our profession, you would know better than I, but I've been corrected. When I try to talk about, I studied masculine psychology, and I've had a female officer say, shut the F up, dude. You think it's hard for guys? Think about a woman trying to keep up with the patrol squad. I can't show any emotion because they already think I can't hack it. So now I know, and you look like you're confirming, females in law enforcement deal with the same bullcrap that men do. Don't show your emotions. Don't show your humanity. When you see a dead child, your heart should be broken. Our hearts are broken. Suicide, when even taking the life of another person, even if it was justified, does something to your heart, to your soul. We need therapy. We need mentors. We need to journal. We need something, whether it's yoga or meditation or contemplative prayer. Like, pick your thing. There's a lot of different spiritual practices out there. There's a ton of self-care stuff out there. There's a million options. There's small group sharing. If you have people you trust, just sharing your story is healing. That's what the ancient tribes did. When the warriors came back, they shared their stories with the community so the community could share the burden of the sacrifice those men and women did for them, if that makes sense. Our community does not do that for us right now. And far too often, our command staff and the leaders of our departments are not doing that for us or not understanding it. I do hope that some people in the younger generations, from what I've heard, are more open to, hey, if you need therapy, and I don't think it should be a need. I think it should just be standard. Hey, there are some departments that were, probably not because of the economy, but give you 10 free therapy sessions a year anonymously. So you go to therapy, you pick your therapist, it's blind billing, it's just a number that gets sent to the agency. So they don't know that Matt Domyancic saw a psychologist or an MFT. So there's no stigma. But it would also take people that have been the badasses in the department and have street credibility to say, hey, when I was going through a divorce, I went through 2 years of therapy and it helped a lot. Or I saw my rabbi. My faith is important to me. When I got in a shooting, I was meeting with my rabbi once a week. I started taking yoga classes. There's people out there doing stuff, but they may not be willing to share it for fear of the same stigma. So it's going to take some people stepping up to have credibility to destigmatize ongoing regular self-care, rather than let's wait till you're the cop on your second divorce, you're freaking broke because you did a bunch of stupid financial decisions. Because what do we do to self-medicate? We buy the toys that we have to work overtime for. We have sex with a bunch of people we shouldn't and ruin our marriage or whatever relationship we're in. We drink, we pop pills. It's kind of weird now. I didn't realize this until I've been in this chaplain position. There's a whole lot of cops out there smoking weed and doing drugs. It just boggles my mind, but it's all self-medicating because we're not allowed to be vulnerable. We're not allowed to be human.
Be human, be real. That's what my shirt says.
Nice.
That was easily my favorite rant of anyone so far. That was excellent. Just reflecting, probably my favorite part, as if anybody cares, my favorite part was talking about the warriors who came back and shared their stories with their loved ones in the town so that people could share the burden of being at war. And something about that just really, it just touches me right here, you know, because I think Lexi and I can confirm a lot of what you're saying, very, even quite specifically, I think touches us. I mean, oh man, yeah. Shit is rough sometimes. And you do need to kind of vocalize that to people and normalize it, because it is a normal part of our job.
And I really see, just in talking with people who have grown up in those really high stress communities where they are seeing some of the same things we are as cops, that a lot of those same like psychological effects happen in those communities. And then we end up kind of meeting them in these two spaces where we're both sort of not in a good psychological space. And that's where all this, a lot of times, this conflict comes from. And I love this idea of like, let me take on your burden and you can take on mine. Like, I think that there might be an area that we could really work on as cop to community to kind of work beyond those spaces.
Pain shared is pain divided.
Ooh, where'd you get that little nugget from?
I wish I knew. I've probably read too many books.
Claim it.
No, I can't claim it. I will.
I don't care.
And then great. Two of the other quotes I do always share, and this is for us all as humans, but especially as cops. And Richard Rohr is a famous spirituality author. He says this a lot. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And we see pain. We see pain every day as cops, right? And then to follow that up, another quote, if you do not heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that did not cut you.
Oh, Shit, it's true. That shit is true, Lexi. Am I right?
I have goosebumps.
I
And
know.
can you make sure to email us both of those so I can
Those,
share them?
yeah, every little like short little colloquialism that you've got going on there. I need those. I'm going to use those as like what are they when you recite a phrase over and over again?
A mantra.
Mantra. Yeah, yeah. That's what I need. My God, yeah, for sure. Those resonate big time. And man, in our job, I think it's pretty prevalent in our job specifically. I mean, I think to varying degrees, people in other realms of, be it business or whatever, educator, they have similar stress. But for some reason, I just think it's both the personality type that is drawn to police work happens to also be sort of wants to be in control of their emotion as much as possible, right? As much as they're in control of every other facet within work. And so those truly, truly resonate, I think, with officers.
And that is a problem as first responders. When we are on the job, we do have to control our emotions. We are not in touch with them because we have to control the scene and everyone else's. That's why it's important after your shift to reflect on your calls and allow yourself to experience those emotions.
I'm feeling some emotions right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely am.
There was something else that popped in something else I did want to mention as you were speaking. There are a number of issues that we may have as cops, firefighters, and veterans, because the stuff we see on the job is unconsciously triggering any wounds we have from childhood or previous experiences. And you guys may have heard of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So there's a list of questions. It could be, did your parents get divorced? Was there any emotional abuse, sexual trauma? There's all these questions. And a high percentage of first responders and those drawn towards the military. So when you go to war, you're working the streets, unaware to you, unconsciously, that childhood pain that you have not yet worked through and healed is being triggered. You're going on a domestic violence call. You're not connecting that something about that hurts me because I was hurt as a child.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we're humans doing this job. We're all these, these very complex creatures with complex histories. And we're not going to be completely immune to what we see and experience, even in a job, capacity. It's just, I mean, that is kind of contributes to the fallacy that cops are going to be perfect every time and make the best decision every time. So that's for sure. I mean, that's the expectation that we're constantly trying to achieve, but we'll never get there. So,
and I think maybe that people are attracted to the career when they've had those traumas because they wanted someone to save them.
Mm.
So they want to be the person to save somebody else. And I think that is an extremely beautiful place to come from. But like you said, it comes from a place of trauma. And if we don't deal with those traumas, they can lend some feelings we don't anticipate on a certain call or a certain thing that happens.
So as much as we train, and this company, the training is their martial arts, right? So train, lift, shoot. As much as we do that, what are we doing with our thoughts? What are we doing with our hearts and our feelings? We have to balance all of that training. I mean, this is work. You want to be a great athlete, it takes work. You want to be a great cop and stay healthy, it takes work. You're going to have to do some extra shooting, fighting, lifting, gym time on your own. And what is your emotional and spiritual weightlifting? How are you going to reflect on the calls and bring up those emotions that you didn't allow yourself to have on the call? Are you going to journal? Are you going to meditate? Do yoga? I'm bringing those up because those are common ones.
Mm-hmm.
But what systems are you going to find to work and process on all the bullshit and all the pain and misery you see at work? And then when you recognize it triggers something from childhood or even a previous relationship, are you going to go to therapy or spiritual direction or a small group, whether it's AA or whatever these other groups are? Where are you going to go to get this stuff off your chest and process it? Or are you going to drink and screw and buy toys?
Well, Matt, I think you'll be happy to know that in our very, very small microcosm position in our department, we were able to put out a fitness program just for the officers, the sworn, and the employees. And one of the things that we decided to do is we call our cool down a debrief. And as part of the debrief, we take that time to do something that's, superficially a cool down, maybe stretching, tactical breathing. But we also put things like reflect on like the hardest call you had this week. What would you have done differently? What would you do the same? Like things like that. So we're starting trying to ease our way. We're maybe not saying like, super emotional things right now, but we're trying to get officers reflecting so that they kind of delve into the emotion that was attached to that hard call. Because we all know what hard call means. It's usually something that stirs up something emotionally, whether it be fear or just sorrow, depression, that kind of thing. And so that's what we're doing in our debrief as part of just regular activity. So you just bang some weights, do some stuff at a high heart rate to get some stress inoculation and skill transfer. And then we just deal with the rest of what happened, like what has happened in your week,
That is awesome. So I want you ladies to start writing a guidebook for departments across the country. I'm serious. And it's good that you stay away from that language. I use the language of emotional and spiritual weightlifting when I give some talks, because sometimes I'm talking with like a theology professor and a psychologist. But when I'm hanging out with cops, a lot of times people are like, the cops that promote me the most in the departments I'm with are not the Christians, even though I'm the chaplain, right? I am not walking around using like academic or mental health or religiosity words, because that shuts people down, or turns people away.
Yeah.
So if you can get them reflecting on those calls without using that language, that's awesome. Just like when I did NFL combine preparation, we didn't tell them I was doing sports psychology. I was a strength coach, but I did a whole bunch of sports psychology as a strength coach. And I did not use any words from psychology. And there were times I even had them doing very deep breath work with stretching, which was essentially yoga.
Yeah.
But if I would have said, guys, we're going to do yoga, they did yoga when they brought in the hot babe once a week.
Right.
But when I did it, I was just like, we're going to cool down.
They're like, what's with the spandex, Matt? Jeez.
I don't know if I'd want to put spandex on. That'd be a sight to see. But when I did the strength conditioning, that was something I did too. The breath work, the stretching, and then I would lay them down and turn out the lights on the mats. Are you familiar with progressive muscle relaxation?
Yes, I am.
I'm not.
So it might be like squeeze your right fist really hard, let it go. Tense your shoulder really hard, let it go. You go around your body and you feel what it's like to be tense and relax. Because a lot of the times we are tense. We don't know the difference. So I would go through some progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing, and then I would go through mock calls. Like I was the dispatcher, and I would be talking them through like getting dispatched to a hot call, and then doing imagery, thinking about all 5 senses, walk them through it. I mean, there's really cool things you can do.
Yeah, Lexi,
if you guys have time with officers.
Yeah, Lexi, I think she programmed something like that just recently, like an imagery type thing. And she put up a partner workout. And then afterwards, you're supposed to either talk through or work through like partner takedowns. And then we do a lot of like imagery stuff. So yeah, we're doing the best that we can in the position that we're in to just sort of start to inch in a little bit to create these habits and normalize some of the stuff that we've been talking about. But Lex, do you have anything else for Matt? We're running a little bit long, but these are, oh man, what an awesome conversation.
I know I could go on and on.
I know.
I think there's something about that physical, especially with cops, that you get them doing something physical and it just allows them to get into that mental state that you need them to be. So I think that's great. I think your experience is just amazing, and well before its time with what you've done. I'm hoping that we catch up to it in these modern times, and that we're able to get officers thinking about their mind, body, and spirit. And I just think you're a great example for that.
Oh, thank you, ladies. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time to chat with us. It's been an honor.
It's my pleasure and my honor. Thank you so much, ladies.